The Blue Jewel.
Chapter 12. Completed. Our great Lady Arian kept the promise, performed to our god 5 years later, of recovering the jewel in Tripulia returned on Elaban's triumph at his temple in Turkheimak. Then she spent the night alone watching over the jewel. Arian's life. Salmaron priestess. The following weeks were of recognition for the heroes. They collected all their stipulated fees despite not fulfilling the contract in all its conditions. Ferdinand apologized to them for not having discovered Fedorus' evil intentions and promised the dissolution of the Order of the White Robes forever. All the jewels were given to the Great Council except two, the Triumph of Elaban and the Jewel of Caesarea, both of which belonged to Arian despite the pressures of the mags who wanted all the jewels for themselves. But in the end they accepted Arian's decision as the council was not in a position to claim. The rest of the jewels would be separated so that they would never be put back together. Despite Ferdinand's promise, the council did not accept the dissolution of the Order of the White Robes. It was too important, and to accept dissolution would be to admit its own corruption. But they did order a reform of the order and the purge of most of its mags. Ferdinand was appointed Grand Master of the White Robes to eliminate the corruption that existed there. They returned to Almera. As always in the wagon travelled the Orcs, Critters, Agnorok and the Kendali, the reins of the horses. Arian rode his faithful Kiona with Aras. Now they were not separated. Gosberg and Kush rode behind Sabu. As always the little Denka played jokes on everyone and was in a good mood. They were all in high spirits and cheerful, except for Agnorok, who was quite reserved except in the brief conversations with Gosberg, Kush or Vanus. He tried to stay away as much as possible, so at dinner time he asked for the first shift on duty, as always. After a month of travel they arrived in Almera. They were received by de Boek with the rest of the company in full. They were entertained with 2 honors, a great triumph, a great reward, more fame, more glory, and as a consequence they would have more jobs and more gold for the company. While the rest celebrated the great victory, Kush delivered the report of the mission to recover Elaban's triumph to de Boek, who as always read it carefully. Who was the Darrick Skull? Jumal, Agnorok knows him. He is the personal bodyguard of Raider Arcio. We did not find his corpse. And we do not know the reason for his involvement in this matter either. The veteran mercenary nodded, continued reading the report. De Boek raised his eyebrows. Something didn't add up. Gosberg gave the jewel to Fedorus. That's right, we suspected Fedorus from the beginning. Doing that was sheer madness. De Boek would normally demote any other mercenary, but he continued to read Kush's report carefully. Fedorus was beheaded. I didn't look closely. I was more attentive to the Soul Eater and Arian. I found the corpse later without a head. Gosberg was fighting against it, but he didn't say anything. As de Boek continued to read the other time until he finished the report, signed it with a golden pen and stamped his sealed seal. That meant that everything was in order and that it could be kept in the archive of successfully completed missions by the company. An excellent job, one of the best of this company. Kush did not get up and de Boek stared at an old dagger that was on the table. The magician could not contain his curiosity. Who is Gosberg really? The old warrior opened a drawer and removed from inside a glass cube that he offered to the magician. Un subwa de dasker. I see you know them. The magician Nermalus, a complete genius of illusions, created them about 1,000 I think. They are very scarce, they are very valuable objects. That's right, they trap images for eternity, they are single use. If you take it to your eyes and put it in the right position, you will be able to see the image that was recorded in it 50 years ago. Kush, intrigued, began to move the cube while looking through it. He had read something about the cubes, but it was the first time he had one. It was a gift from the grandfather of the current king of Demember. De Boek continued to speak as Kush tried to see the image that was engraved on the cube. Kush finally managed to see the image and he couldn't believe it. It was like being present at that moment 50 years ago, and there he was, Gosberg, posing happily with a group of warriors. Next to him was a young man of just about 15 years old. That young man was Dubok. It's him. But how? Kush was amazed. Dubok, smiling, got up and went to a cupboard where he kept a series of bottles reserved for special occasions. He poured 2 glasses and one he handed to Kush. Before speaking, he drank his glass in one gulp. My father and uncle were veterans of the wars of the Plague Decade. They ended up without a king to serve. They went to Almera. But it was a port where aimless warriors found work if they didn't ask too much. It was here in a tavern that he met my mother, a former warrior of the Kingdom of Balduin, who supported the side of the wrong claimant to the throne in the Civil War, but was able to flee. He ended up in Almera as well. The two fell in love, and between adventures I grew up. They left me in a tavern that was located where these barracks are now built. It was called the Blue Phoenix. Those who ran the place took care of me when my parents were away. I was already 10 years old. My blood boiled from going to fight, but I was too young. One summer night he arrived. He had never seen a Denka, or anyone in Almera really. With his haughty air he took a seat and began to play a game of cards with the worst of Almera, the most cheaters. All of them were ruthless murderers. At the end of the night they fought. He was caught cheating like them. It was an unfair fight and my uncle went to help him. My uncle was very fond of fights in taverns and also hated many of those involved. The worst kind of Almera died that night. My uncle was not an easy person to impress and he swore that he had never seen anything like it. Since then he has become a member of the family. My parents and my uncle had multiple adventures with him. Our fame increased deservedly. In the end, when I was 15 years old, I went with them. It was an impossible mission. We had to help a pretender to the throne of Demember to reach the crown and also prevent an invasion of the dwarfs of the Dragon Ridge to the mines of the kingdom. It was the first Iron War. We did it. I was there in those mines. That image captured in the cube is from when we returned with a bag full of gems, bought the Blue Phoenix tavern and turned it into our headquarters. The rest is history. Gosberg is not always here. My parents died, like my uncle. Over the years many other mercenaries have changed companies. Others are retired or dead, but he always comes and goes. He hadn't appeared for 10 years. Personally he thought he had died in one of his crazy adventures, but one day. He arrived with a baby Denka to take care of. Since then he does some mission that interests him and then disappears from time to time, without commenting anything. I was not worried when he accepts a mission despite his methods always ends successfully. He is also the oldest active member of this company, so he is the one who has the highest rank of all. Dubok took a breath, then moved a little closer to the magician and showed him a piece of paper, written in Gosberg's handwriting. The first thing that amazed the magician was the calligraphy, extraordinary. Then there was a list of names on the paper and next to it some very specific locations with a margin of dates. 6 years ago he took a seat in that chair where you are sitting and filled this scroll with the names of a series of promising warriors who it was convenient to hire for the company. The first of them a dwarf exiled from the Brown Hills and who as you can see lived poorly on the western coast of Darkost, the last one more than a year ago, a wandering half-orc who is said to have defeated the king of the vampires. Kush finished the contents of the glass and placed Dasker's bucket on the table. He wanted us all to be here at this very moment. Dubok smiled as he poured himself another drink. Dumal finished speaking and everyone was silent. His exposition of the facts was impeccable to the pride of his king, while the dark divinity remained silent and no one dared to be the first to speak. Gosberg is a Laban. Everyone in silence. Gosberg had been the subject of debate for a long time and they considered him too extravagant to be the identity of such a powerful god, and he only had the strangest adventures that did not harm society much. After this pause his divinity continued with his dissertation. Fedorus has betrayed us. He wanted the power to achieve immortality, forgetting that we are at a greater goal than a simple desire of a necromancer. Do not worry, he has paid dearly for his betrayal. The divinity was incorporated from his throne. The chosen one of the gods. Dumal was now hesitant to answer, but because he looked down on Agnorak so much, he chose the other half-orc. It's Aris without a doubt. If everything falls into place, it can pose a threat to our plans as the young priestess. The king of Arcia was as always the only one who dared to contradict his divinity. For 25 years we will not find another conjunction to use the full potential of jewelry. The shadow turned before the king of Arcio. Jumal feared the worst. It is much better, we will have plenty of time to weave a trap that will finish with Elaban, his priestess and the chosen one, but we have to weave it with great care, without haste but without pause, that little by little they are introduced inside it and at the right time. What about jewelry? Will we have to put them back together? That will be a more than considerable setback. The first time it took us more than 3,000 years to find them. His divinity smiled complacently, mortals, always with urgency, but he had to calm the spirits of his devoted followers with shocking news. This time it won't take that long. Since we will only have to worry about recovering 2 jewels. Everyone in the room was shocked, but they were used to being surprised by their dark divinity. He had never failed them at any time. Knights, I present to you the replacement of the vacancy left by Fedorus. He has been at our service for quite some time, but now I think it is time for him to join this society in a more protagonist way. Especially when he has proven his fidelity to our cause. Before them the great magician Ferdinand de Bussy appeared smiling. It is an honor to serve your divinity and this sacred society. Agnorok requested a meeting with de Boek, the former mercenary waiting for the request for a salary increase. Something normal for mercenaries after their first important mission, but what he was going to hear would leave him stunned. I want to leave the company. De Boek didn't react immediately, he remained silent, staring at the half-orc before speaking. That cannot be at the moment, you have a contract signed for 5 years and you have not even completed 2 years within our company. He was not willing to lose such a good warrior without some resistance. That's true, but I'm willing to offer you a deal. I'm listening. Agnorok left a bag full of gold coins on the table, something de Boek loved. It was a good way to start. My share for the recovery of the jewels plus some savings that I had saved in compensation for leaving our contract on hold. On hold? I accept what I have signed, but now it is impossible to continue here. But I promise to come back in a while, when I request it or you need me for important work. De Boek stroked his beard. Holding someone back unwillingly was always a source of trouble. He searched his filing cabinet for Agnorok's contract, pulled out a blank sheet of paper, wrote a paragraph quickly. Then he offered the sheet to the half-orc to read before they both signed it. The half-orc read carefully. Knowing how to read is an important thing in the life of a mercenary. Is that correct? Yes. Agnorok and de Boek signed the annex and then shook hands. Be very lucky, half-orc, you are much better than I had been told. Also de Boek, thank you for everything. De Boek was disappointed. He had found the perfect team and now after a single mission it was dismantled. He should find other mercenaries. They would not be so good, but the fame of his company would make his future clients pay double for their work. The barracks were silent, Agnorok slowly descending the stairs with his backpack loaded and his sword slung behind him. He had left the company uniform in his chambers. He was dressed in his grimy, worn-out black clothes. He had kept his boots, they were too good to waste, now he was about to go out at dawn. He couldn't help but remember that morning at the CD Inn, and since he had refused to go out the door to help that prostitute, because of that decision he was here, but now he would go out the door, nothing would stop him. The half-orc was slowly advancing, savoring the moment. Staying would be leading a comfortable life full of fame and gold, but seeing Arian every day with Aris was something she couldn't stand, so it was better to leave. Agnorok was not sure if he could control his feelings that could also turn against him with jealousy, hatred, envy. Better to take a distance, besides that the hell it couldn't be worse than the last time when he had ended up condemned to death. With these pleasant thoughts he slowly descended the stairs, until he noticed the sound of a door opening and a little accelerated footsteps advancing towards him. Agnorok didn't want to look back, he didn't want to. Agnorok! It was Arian's voice. The half-orc stopped in his tracks but did not turn his head. Agnorok, you are leaving without saying goodbye. Please don't go. Stay here with us. Agnorok's intuition is that he shouldn't stop, but he didn't turn. There was Arian with his eyes full of tears. I must go. Believe me, it is the best thing for everyone. No. Agnorok came over and wiped away the young woman's tears with one finger. No. The half-orc smiled slightly. Arian remembered the first time she saw him in Tame's tavern, with his grim and serious countenance. Now he was leaving, he would miss him so much. Agnorok took a deep breath, turned around. Arian spoke in a serious tone. It's no coincidence, you remember, if I had to be in the temple to retrieve the jewel, so did you. Your presence in this adventure is not a coincidence either. The half-orc stopped. Arian had changed. He had always been strong, but now she knew the power he had. Agnorok, you have to be with us. We need you. Arian, you are the hope of this world. If something happens to you, will you be? I hope not. You are the hope and I am. Agnorok turned and disappeared through the door. Arian kept trying to babble a word that he only managed to say when the half-orc had disappeared. Death. It was not a pleasant morning. Almera woke up with fog and a fine rain permeated the atmosphere. Agnorok walked slowly but firmly. In his pocket there were only 2 silver coins. In short, he had survived worse situations in life. Where are we going, young man? Gosberg was leaning against the corner. As he tossed his strange coin with that strange spiral-shaped engraving, the Denka showed it to the half-orc before putting it away. A good friend gave it to me. You know, most of them don't see the miracles that are shown in front of them. They are too focused on their miserable lives. It's not your case. You're always attentive. Agnorok stood still. Not only was Gosberg there, Sabu and the Kendali accompanied him. I travel alone. Gosberg lit a cigar and smiled. You are not going alone this time. You have a lot to learn. Agnorok shook his head before smiling. Gosberg had made up his mind, and nothing could be done to him. You're like drunken gnomes. The quartet began to walk. Tell me, Gosberg, how did you manage to leave the company? Vanus is not a mercenary, so she is free. Sabu and I can do whatever we want. Does the boat consent to it? Gosberg smiled, and a slight blue glint emerged in his large brown eyes. Agnorok lowered his head and smiled again. And now, what, sir? Vanus asked the Denka. The gods will provide, Vanus. It was just saying those words when out of nowhere a young man appeared with a face of despair. Help please, I need mercenaries. Some pirates want to attack my town and no mercenary company wants to help me. The half-orc and the little Denka looked at each other. And the reward? It is not much, but the cause is just. Agnorok thought, what the hell? We will accompany you. The young man smiled gratefully and with a sign he told them to follow him to the port of Almera where he had a small boat to leave immediately. 2 weeks before Agnorok's departure. Loaf climbed the hill with difficulty. The years were unforgiving. He had little time left, but it was his last mission and he had to talk to his lord who was waiting for him at the top of the mountain, from which he could see the town of Caesarea. It was the same place where more than a year ago Arian had said goodbye to his previous life on his way to Tripulia. Excuse the delay, my lord. His lord lit a cigar and scratched one of his furry ears. Don't worry, Loaf, you've done well. Arian? He's safe. It's a shame Nilam's death. I couldn't help it. I couldn't do anything. I know, my lord. You have served me well, now you deserve a break. Go south of Olbiana. There is a small fishing town, Sermina. You will be well welcomed. The weather is pleasant and you will be able to live comfortably. I will take care of that. Thank you, my lord. Loaf had a doubt, more like a plea. At least he wanted to say goodbye to her. He tried one more time. I can't see her anymore. That's Loaf. I'm so sorry, but she shouldn't know anything. The two of them were silent watching Caesarea. In reality Loaf had never left the place. He was hidden supervising that things never deviated from the plans set by his lord, well more or less. Loaf approached the Denka. And now, what's going to happen? They know who I am, they will not stop until they destroy me. My lord, that would be a disgrace to everyone. They have achieved nothing thanks to their divinity. Gosberg smiled and took a drag on his cigar, his eyes glowing bright blue. Sometimes a defeat is necessary to win the war. At what price? This time it's something I can't decide. Gosberg disappeared, leaving Loaf alone again, watching the sun rise on the small fishing village. Everything was calm. Loaf knew that something very big was coming. He would not see it, at least on this plane. Everything was about to change forever. Epilogue. There are no doubts, I have in my possession the first Agnorac's contract with the mercenary company. All those who argue against my theses. You must finally agree with me. Ilian N. Correspondentia Personal. The happy days passed for Arian and Aris. It is true that they missed their companions. The hole left was large, but they had to accept their decision, although they were confident that sooner or later they would all get together again. The night was starry and both were on the terrace of the best room in the entire mercenary headquarters, full of comforts. The half-orc offered a glass of wine to the young woman who accepted with pleasure. Soon he would return to the hard life of military campaigns or who knows what series of commissions de Boek had prepared for him, with which he would return to training shortly, although now he enjoyed a well-deserved rest. Arian was silently looking at the stars. Aris asked him curiously. He never looked at the stars. Aris had some basic astronomical knowledge, enough to orient himself and know the cycles of the two moons that were essential to orcs, but he had never found them interesting. What do you think about? You are not going to get angry. No. Where Agnorak will be. Aris was silent. Agnorak liked him. He was a half-orc like him, but of a very uncertain origin for a white orc, a mystery. Although he was a loyal companion and an extraordinary warrior. He saved my life in front of that devourer of souls. Arian smiled. It was true. Kush had told him of that feat, the first mortal to injure a soul-eater before she was the first mortal to kill one. I will always be grateful to him for that. Added Aris. Will it be okay? Aris drank a little from the cup and leaned against the wall with her elbows while observing the sea. Agnorak. He is only actually happy wielding a weapon, being surrounded by dozens of enemies, and standing next to Gosberg. And believe me, that's very easy to achieve. Arian smiled. And protesting about it. They both smiled. Aris remembered the duel. Agnorak had the potential to be an Ashura. His cousins were of that opinion, too. He's only happy like that. Aris finished the cup, stroked the young woman, and then retreated inwards, leaving Arian alone looking at the stars. The jewel of Caesarea hung around his neck. The triumph of Elaban was kept by de Boek. Arian planned to return it to its place. The power of that jewel was too tempting for others, and for her. In the cursed city it would be safe. The young woman touched the jewel lightly and a spark came tickling her finger. Arian smiled, looked at the sky and only managed to smile. A star shone in the sky, his favorite. Loaf always told a story to Nilam and her at the end of the summer. The name of the protagonist was the same as that of that star, Astabaran. Arian had watched many times in secret as Agnorak when he was on the first guard duty. He always observed that same star in the sky, but he had never told him anything about the legend he knew about that star. Arian smiled. It was not a coincidence. He had a hunch, and as if saying goodbye to Agnorak he whispered again. The chosen one of the gods. The fog was lifting, the pirates were hesitating, many dead comrades lay on the ground. It could not be that such a small group caused so many casualties. When visibility improved, they saw them there. At the head of the small group was a young man with black hair. He smiled, showing a huge fang. The pirates retreated, but it was too late. Death was coming to them.